Tensions are boiling. Recently, President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky clashed in a heated Oval Office press conference, Trump demanding an immediate ceasefire, while Zelensky pushed for stronger security guarantees. But here's the real question. What if Ukraine falls into Russian hands? The consequences could shake the world. Stay tuned. What if Ukraine falls to Russia? A world transformed for 3 years, Ukraine has stood as the last line of defense against Russian aggression. The world has watched as its cities have been bombed, its people have resisted, and its leaders have begged for continued support. But what if, despite all the aid, sanctions, and speeches, Ukraine falls? It wouldn't just be a victory for Russia, it would be a seismic shift in global power. The consequences would ripple far beyond Ukraine's borders, reshaping alliances, economies, and even the future of democracy itself. The death of Ukrainian sovereignty. If Ukraine falls, it won't go quietly. Russian forces would likely establish a puppet regime, replacing Zelensky with a Kremlin loyalist. Ukrainian culture, language, and identity could be suppressed, similar to what happened in Crimea after Russia's annexation in 2014. Dissent would be crushed, media silenced, and resistance movements hunted down. The war wouldn't end. It would morph into an insurgency, with Ukrainian fighters launching guerrilla attacks while the world debates whether to continue supporting them. But without a sovereign government, Ukraine's voice on the world stage would be gone. A broken NATO and a weakened free world. For decades, NATO has positioned itself as the ultimate shield against Russian aggression. If Ukraine falls, that shield would look weak. Nations like Poland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, who have relied on NATO's protection, would wonder, are we next? The U.S. has long been called the leader of the free world. But if Ukraine is abandoned or defeated, America's global influence would take a major hit. Would Taiwan still trust U.S. promises of protection against China? Would other countries start making their own deals with Russia and China instead of relying on Western security? A victory for Russia would send a chilling message. Democracy is vulnerable, and dictatorships can win. Putin's next move: more war. If Ukraine falls, why would Putin stop there? He has already claimed that parts of Poland, the Baltics, and Moldova belong to Russia's historical territory. With Ukraine under his control, he'd have a stronger economy, a bigger army, and a victory that would silence internal critics. Would he push further into Europe, daring NATO to respond? Or would he focus on another kind of war? Cyberattacks, election interference, and economic blackmail? With control over Ukraine's resources and trade routes, Russia could dictate terms to a weakened Europe, forcing countries into dependence on Russian energy and goods. Global shockwaves, economic crisis, and food shortages. Ukraine is one of the world's largest grain exporters. If Russia controls that supply, countries in the Middle East and Africa could face food shortages, leading to unrest, protests, and even new refugee crises. Meanwhile, global markets would react with panic. Oil and gas prices could surge as Europe scrambles for alternatives. Sanctions on Russia could tighten, but black market trade with China, Iran, and North Korea would keep Moscow's economy afloat. And while Ukraine's economy collapses, Russia could strip its industries, land, and resources, just as it did in Crimea. The long war, resistance, and proxy battles. Even if Russia takes Ukraine, it won't hold it easily. The U.S. and its allies would likely support an underground Ukrainian resistance, supplying weapons, intelligence, and funding. It could turn into another Afghanistan-like scenario for Russia, a long, bloody insurgency that drains resources and morale. But this time, the stakes would be higher. Unlike Afghanistan, this war would be happening right on NATO's doorstep. The risk of direct conflict between Russia and the West would be greater than ever. The future of global power. If Ukraine falls, the world will change. The balance of power will tilt toward authoritarian regimes. China may see it as a green light to invade Taiwan. Iran and North Korea may become more aggressive, knowing that Western deterrence is weaker than it once seemed. A Russian victory wouldn't just be about land, it would be about ideology. It would prove that brute force wins, that diplomacy is weak, and that the world is entering a new era where might makes right. So the real question is, can the world afford to let Ukraine fall?